Welcome back to Landmarks Discovered. In this episode, we'll take you to 64 Via Mizner, the embodiment of Addison Mizner's vision for European living in Palm Beach. In a past episode of Landmarks Discovered, we visited Via Mizner and Via Parigi and spoke of the development of these vias in relationship to Worth Avenue and the Everglades Club. In this episode, we get to do a deep dive into one specific address within Via Mizner and appreciate the unique history of this specific building within the larger context.
Via Mizner consists of 11 buildings. Addison Mizner started the development in 1923. And, what we see today when we walk through Via Mizner is really Addison Mizner's ideals of European living. So he really wanted to set up a place that became the new main street of Palm Beach. He wanted to provide an opportunity for guests to shop and the shopkeepers to live there. So when we visit Leta's shop today, we can really see his vision in modern times.
And I think it really speaks to the timelessness of his designs, that she is able to live this really idealistic lifestyle where she has her shop on the first floor and her studio on the second, and then her personal apartment on the third. And that's something that I think in the past was very common and still in many parts of Europe, but for the most part, America has gotten away from that. So it's almost like a time capsule in some ways.
It is, and she definitely brags to everybody that she only has a 7-second commute. And during her interview with her passion for preservation really came through. And she tells great stories about how this building was restored by her and her husband, and that she wanted a wreck of a building to bring back to life.
And I think it's not just about preserving a physical building. It's preserving a way of life.
Especially because, when we walk through Via Mizner, it's a public area. It's one of the few spaces that you can go and fully appreciate and being ensconced in Mizner's architecture and work and his vision for Palm Beach. Whereas, a lot of the places we emphasize here on Landmarks Discovered, they're private homes. So this is when you go there and you can see Leta's store and how she lives, you're really experiencing Mizner's vision for Palm Beach.
I think that's so true because anywhere else you go on the island, like the modern world has enveloped it, right? It doesn't have that same feeling of stepping back in time, and that's what makes Via Mizner and Via Parigi so special, is that even though it's 2022, it could just as easily be 1922, except they weren't built yet.
Yes, and speaking of 1922, when we're researching for this episode, I came across a really funny article about a charity event going on in Via Mizner, and they put Spanish tapestries everywhere and covered the space up, and then they referred to it as Waffle Alley. So then that was the popular term to use in the 20s for Via Mizner, Waffle Alley.
But why?
I don't know. I guess they serve waffles during the day there.
We'll be asking Marie to look into that in case you wondered where she was right now. Without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Leta Austin Foster to talk to you about the building's history and why it's the perfect place for her live-work lifestyle.
I started coming to Palm Beach in 1972 when I married my husband, Ridgely. And he was my sponsor. He said, I want you to go back to your job again, being a decorator. So I started my business then too. So the business and the marriage are 50 years old. We did have a building, which I love, very beautiful, over in Phipps Plaza. And I adored Phipps Plaza. It was such a pretty building. But I despised my landlord. And so I came home and told Ridgely one day, I said, honey, either you have to find me a building or I'm going to be taken for murder, and this is a capital punishment state. So I don't want that. So anyway, he found me another building first, but I said, no. I want a building that's a wreck that I have to do over. And about 2 weeks later, he came home and said, I have found your wreck. And it was this building, and it was a wreck. It had box air conditioners all sticking out in front, rust running down the walls, broken glass. But you could see the bones of the building. And I could see that it could be beautiful. And it was built by Addison Mizner as part of Via Mizner. And he built the two Vias at the same time, Via Mizner and Via Parigi, which is named after Paris singer. And he wanted them to feel like Italy. And, that's what he did. He collected and made antiques from the period. And he used them in his buildings. Sadly, many of the Addison Mizner houses and buildings have been torn down. That should never have happened. So we bought the building, and we came into it and looked at it. And we decided we wanted it, and we bought it. And I hired Joe Dixon out of New York City, who's an old-time friend, to work with me on it. And we used a fabulous contractor named Robert Vendette. And it was just a matter of taking a hotel for bachelors, because that's what it was. It was a hotel of little rooms, 2 bathrooms to a floor. And the downstairs was the dining room and a lobby and a living room. And the only food they ever served to other people, I think, I'm not positive about this, was tea. So the young men could bring women and their husbands and things over for tea in the room, which is now where you're going to see sheets. So at any rate, it was a fabulous project. And we couldn't start on the downstairs part for 7 months, because they had a sitting tenant. And but we could do the upstairs, and we did. And it was a matter of gut and fill, and I really love what Joe designed. He did a few things that I changed, but basically he was such a great space planner. So he had over there a refrigerator. I said, Joe, you come in the front door at the elevator, no one wants to look at a refrigerator. That's going to be a stove, but it's going to look like a fireplace. So that's what it is. And it's all done with Portuguese tiles. And then recently, because of the new wallpaper line, we repainted all the kitchen cabinetry in that kind of mustard yellow, very French color. But we kept the rest of the woodwork in the natural pine that it was. It was very yellow when we first started because it was pine. And now it's aged. It's been 26 years, so it's aged to a nice, warm brown. And Sally, my daughter, who runs our New York office, she found all the antique light fixtures in New York and brought them down. And they're really quite wonderful. I just love the building. The upper part of the rafters, and that's where Tallahassee was such a help, preservation. They said, if you're going to central air condition the building, you have to have 6 inches of insulation plus your sheetrock. And they said, but you got 7 inches on those trusses, so you'll be able to have some of it exposed. So it looks as though they're rafters, but they were actually part of trusses. And then we put up a big steel band all the way around the inside, the big rafters. They push the beams. They push the steel bands out so that the building cannot implode on itself because of the weight of the tile roof. The nice thing about this area is no matter which way you look, you're looking at the tile roofs, even when you look in the little teeny windows to the west, because you see, that used to be the hall to the 6 little bedrooms. So it had little teeny windows. But the windows, not all the glass, but the windows are original. Those are not. Those are the ones I bargained for and got when I agreed to central air the building. And I open that every morning and go out there for my coffee. I love sitting out there. And now, if we were to go out there and sit, it's as cool as though it were air conditioned because we're open to the ocean up there. So you don't see it, but you feel it, and you feel the wind. And I think one of the things I love about old buildings is that they took advantage of things like that. Like all the bigger windows on this side, the casements and things, are open to the ocean side. That little alcove was added to add light. They weren't planning on people eating in it, to add light to the apartment. And it was done by John Volk when there must have been a hotel until then, now that I think about it. But he did it in 1951. And he was a wonderful architect. It's like Venice or Florence, where the people do live above. They don't necessarily own the stores below, but Venice especially. I have a wonderful friend in Venice who is actually a descendant of one of the Doges, and she lives above a grocery store. Well, I have a 7-second commute. That's a big benefit in a town where parking is a problem. And I keep my car in a permit down a block. I love to use wallpaper because I think wallpaper is your biggest bang for your buck. You don't have to put pictures on it, but you can, and it's enhanced by that. And wallpaper gives life and color. And so when Waterhouse Wall Hangings asked me if I would like to do a line of wallpaper, I said yes, because if you put your hand on that paper and touch it, it has life to it. It has feeling. You can touch it. For instance, this one is called Les Jeux Orientaux. It's based on 2 very old patterns, the boy in a swing, and also it's called the boy in a tree, but in this one, we used a man in the tree. And we have a monkey for one of the things. We've added things to it, and we changed the colors because I wanted the colors to be more today. Colors are brighter today. We have a wider variety of dyes than there used to be. And the reason it's called Oriental, even though they're very definitely European figures, but they're dressed as though they were from the Orient. So it's I love the pattern. It has pomegranates, it has flowers, and yet it's very today. It's today while the actual design is almost 200 years old. Well, the designs from which we took it. I just voluntarily landmarked my house on Pendleton, and I am voluntarily landmarking this building, even though it is already on the National Register, because I want these examples of architecture to be preserved.
What Leta has done is incredibly commendable. I mean, she has restored a public space within the town of Palm Beach, and she also recently voluntarily designated her home on Pendleton, which, as you recall, in a last episode, Kit Panel also voluntarily designated her home on Pendleton. And it's just so wonderful to see Palm Beach property owners come together to restore these properties and landmark them so that future generations can enjoy them.
Thanks for joining us for Landmarks Discovered. In our next episode, we'll highlight the recent revitalization of Lake Drive Park and interview Keith Williams of Navarro Williams. I hope you'll join us.